The up-and-coming, already published author might have never thought back in 1973 that his books would crash the media industry on such a huge scale. While Stephen probably didn't think that he would eventually end up as one of the great best-selling writers of the next few decades, a highly decorated man of letters, a brand name, and a one-man movie cottage industry, the films adapted to his stories say otherwise. For filmmakers far and wide, so many of his non-canonical horror novels, as well as his non-spooky story output, were fodder. The term "a Stephen King movie" brings its own standards, criteria, and conventions with it.
Do you want it back?
Yes, please.
Hello, movie buffs! This is your guy, Heisenberg, and you're watching The Watch Culture. In today's episode, I'm going to tell you about some of the greatest films that were adaptations of the legendary writer Stephen King's books. Today, you will know what real horror content is.
Here's Johnny!
But before we hop into the details, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends. Well, it's quite impossible to not know who this iconic writer is. But for those of you who do not know who Stephen King really is, he is the father of all horror and psychological fiction. King's three-dimensional, dynamic characters are one of the most prominent characteristics of his writing techniques.
Any fucking thing for him.
And his stories captivate and engage his loyal fans and first-time readers. For example, the protagonist in Carrie is a high school girl ostracized because she's different. Nearly everyone at some point in their adolescence has experienced the sting of rejection by their peers or the profound psychic pain of suffering repeated emotional abuse. That makes the book only more relatable and understandable. However, it's not only about his writing style but the story and endless plot twist of his books themselves that are highly engaging and make it almost impossible to put the book down. As mentioned above, Carrie was Stephen King's first novel, published in 1974 with a print run of 30,000 copies. King favored an epistolary form to produce realism in the novel by using a combination of letters, news clippings, magazine articles, and passages from books, focusing on psychological trauma and everyday life problems and blending those to make the perfect horror story for something only he can do. Two versions of this iconic film were made and both were good enough to make a chill go down our spines. Castle Rock, the second season of which is now unavailable on Hulu, is a series of connected stories as opposed to a single, overarching one. But that approach reveals one of Stephen King's greatest strengths. He can create whole worlds with multiple believable characters that bring a place to life. The town of Castle Rock has enough horror stories to want to make you leave, but the mysteries are irresistible. Stephen King often creates identifiable characters due to inherently imperfect human qualities that evoke instant sympathy from readers. The poor girl in It, Beverly Marsh, was exploited by her father. The deaf-mute in The Stand was Nick Andrews, and in The Shining, Wendy Torrance was Jack's long-suffering wife. These are just a few characters that explain the phenomenon and what make the movies or TV shows we see today 10 times better and relatable. King is very sensitive to kids as characters in general. It's probably because of the way kids see the world as something that's only half understood and full of unseen, unknowable, enigmatic, and scary forces. Much like the world of It, another best-selling novel by King, in which children are terrorized and murdered by a hideous extra-dimensional creature simply because they find it too easy to believe in it. Released in 1986, the horror novel It is a story of an eponymous being in the form of a clown that terrorizes children. The tale follows the escapades of 7 children as the tale is told by King through narratives that move between 2 time periods. Mostly in the third-person all-seeing mode, it is said, It addresses the most common themes of King, the omnipotence of memory, the agony of childhood, and the monstrousness behind the disguise of classic sectarian values. In his novel Christine, which was later turned into a blockbuster mystery film, King explained in his interviews that Annie's car symbolizes the end of innocence, or that time when getting your first car means you're no longer a carefree, innocent child, but a culpable adult with responsibilities. King's horror novel Christine was published in 1983, where he tells the story of a classic car controlled by ghostly powers. Another theme that's commonly used in King's book is the depiction of a small American city as a setting for the most horrific and amazing events.
All the bad things that happen in this town are because of one thing.
In several other works of literature, it has since become a common trope. Foreshadowing and suspense are part of all unforgettable literature. In all of these novels and short stories, King is the master of combining these three literary devices by developing dynamic characters who not only respond to events around them, but also undergo some kind of marked psychological shift due to either adapting or relenting to the compelling event. Even if some of King's characters struggle to survive the conflict, in a weirdly satisfying way, he somehow manages to make us feel sorry for them. A great example of that is when Jack Torrance tries to reclaim his true self at the end of The Shining and tells his son Danny to run away. Remember how much I love you.
Never do anything to hurt you. Never.
We realize that while Jack is now a crazed killer possessed by an evil spirit, his soul's fodder side can never be taken away from him. The Shining was published in 1977 and became his first hardback bestseller, which was later turned into a film. The Shining is greatly influenced by Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House, Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of the Red Death, and Robert Marasco's Burnt Offerings. To understand his work, one has to dive into a deep sea of endless possibilities and interconnections, because only then would you be able to completely understand what he was exactly trying to say. If you like this video, then make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos in the future. Also, hit the bell icon to stay up to date and be the first one to watch our latest videos.